Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, a business podcast about revenue-generating partnerships, not a podcast about business time with friends. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
We are here with none other than the relationship renegade, Mr. People First himself, Mark Kilens. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. That is the best. That's one of the best intros. It might not be the best. There's a podcast I was on recently that was it actually was just insane, but that's got to be top two.
I love it. If I need to see it on the LinkedIn tagline as of Monday, so let's make sure we make that happen. Okay. Anyway, man, I'm stoked to have you on the show with us today. As a lot of people may not know, you and I got a chance to spend some time working together at Drift back in the day. So we've known each other for quite some time, and now get introduced to what you guys are building in your company, which we'll talk about in a second. But man, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be with you and Sam, and yeah, we can talk about our crazy kids, talk about oysters, whatever, you know.
Oh, don't worry. We're about to talk about some oysters. So you and I last hung out in Boston. You took me. What was the place? Astra. You took me out to Astra, and I have. If no one's ever been to Astra in Boston, like Google it right now and add it to your list because it was a top 5 meal of all time.
I heard about it.
Mark didn't downplay it either. He was like, "I'm not about to blow your mind with dinner." I'm like, "Okay, sure. I've had a lot of great meals, but." Yeah,
Sam is jealous. You got to take Sam there, Jason.
I know.
Yeah, Sam's never been to Boston.
I was gonna say there's a whole lot to unpack there. I haven't even been to Boston. I hear you're a sailor. I've never been sailing, but I also get really bad seasickness. So
I told her about Maine.
But...
I've never been to Maine, so we've got a lot to do when we come see you.
Yeah, I know we can get on the water. Yeah, I mean, you can combat seasickness, as you probably know. There's things you can take, do.
I don't know, Sam. That's a tough one. I'm telling you. So anyway,
I'll wave from shore.
Yeah.
In a plane. You'd be in a plane above us.
Yeah, with a glass of champagne and a float.
Now we're talking.
When we sat down at Astra, we had a chance to really do some good catching up, and you were sharing with me what you were building, which I don't think at the time had gone public. So I love a good story behind a business name, right? And we sat down and talked about it, and you told me about it, and I was like, well, why this? And you broke it down for me, and I loved it. So tell us what Mark Kilens and Nick Bennett are building up to, company name, and the story behind it.
Sure, and you got a great one as well. We started TACK because we've been go-to-market operators and leaders in many companies for a long time. I've been doing it for just about 17 years. Nick's been doing it for over 10 years. And last year, even still right now, it's tough, especially in SaaS-based business models, tech. And we felt, and this has always been true, but it's so acute right now, that businesses are always under a ton of pressure. There's all this pressure. There's pressure from the outside. There's pressure from the inside. There's headwinds.
Just continues to mount.
There's tailwinds. There's all this pressure. And CEOs and go-to-market leaders are always trying to find the right course. Like, what's the right tack should I take? How do I combat this pressure? How do I avoid maybe this storm? I see some pressure over there. The forecast says it's not looking good. Can I avoid that? How do I get ready for that? Et cetera, et cetera. Hence the name TACK, which means many different things. It actually, in many different languages, it means different things. But for the context of our business and what we're trying to help B2B software companies, tech companies do, it's find the right course to help you grow in an efficient, effective way that puts people first.
Love that.
Okay,
that's
so
awesome.
let's dive right in there. People first. Even before we hit record, we've heard you say that a ton. If anybody follows you on LinkedIn, it's in almost every post. So tell us what. No, it is good. You're building your brand, and that's what you're known for. But what is people first go to market? First and foremost, give us your pitch.
Yeah. So I'll go back and tell a story. So I was one of the first businesses and people to ever use HubSpot. So I was at this bootstrap startup in 2008, 2009. That was a tough time.
Way back then.
That was a tough time. I was too young to be in the business world in 2000, but I remembered I was 15, 16. I was building computers. Shout out to all the people that used to build computers, like PCs, like gaming computers, that all the time.
Yep.
So I was too young though to be like in the business world in 2000, but 2008, I graduated college in 2007, dropped out of graduate school after 3 weeks because I didn't feel like it was right. Best decision I think I've ever made in my life. One of the best ones. Because I definitely would have had debts, and it would have been tough to find a job after 2 years.
Time.
It would have been tough. So I get a job. By the way, at this company that, is 10 people.
First of all, shout out to you for getting a job, because I also graduated at that time and did not get a job. So
I hustled. I learned early on the importance of how you sell yourself in an interview process is extremely important. How you tell your story to different people that are interviewing you is the art of getting the job you want. That's a whole other podcast episode, maybe.
I want to know more about that on the next episode.
So ironically, though, I dropped out of grad school. I have a snowmaking background as well. I know how to make snow, both commercially and at your house. So I decided to do that for like 2 months. And I'm like, that's not good enough. That's like not going to make me enough money. So I got it, and that was like a lot of like physical labor that I was like, I'm not really that interested in doing. Like, 2 a.m. making snow in the pitch black.
So I said,
all right, let me get a job. So in November of 2007, I should say, let me find a job. I got into this company in Jan 2008. Fast forward 12 months, we're trying to figure out how to grow the business. And I say to Google, like we used to do a lot more than we do now. That's related, by the way, to the story. But going back to 2008, I go to Google and say, how to generate more leads. I don't know how to generate leads. I'm like 22, 23 years old, right? No freaking idea. So guess what comes up?
HubSpot.
Yeah, HubSpot. Inbound marketing. I'm like, oh man, this is interesting. And keep in mind, Facebook was 4 years old at that point, maybe five. Yeah. Fun fact about that, I was one of the first 15th college to ever get access to Facebook. That was interesting.
Wow.
I bet.
That's the advantage of being in Boston, I imagine.
Exactly. Fun fact about that, I had used Facebook for 4 years. In 2007, I could see the train wreck coming. I quit Facebook in 2007, have never logged back in. That's a fact.
Good for you. Yeah, you're not missing anything. I can tell you that.
So a lot of mini stories in this story that will eventually get to your question, Sam.
Story time with Mark Kilens.
I want to know more about snowmaking, but for another time.
I used to own homesnowmaking.com, makesnowathome.com. Oh yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other life.
That's unreal.
So I get HubSpot, buy HubSpot. I remember on their website at that time vividly, we have 1,000 customers. So I was one of the first 1,000 customers. It was on their homepage. That's what they were touting. And within 12 months, it changed the business. Like I mean, it was so easy back then. I could like go to Google, look at a keyword, write some content about it, and within like 2 or 3 days, be like in number 1 or number 2 position. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
That's awesome.
Times have changed.
It's probably a stupid cheap back then too, to rank and do all those pay-per clicks and everything.
It was so easy. So this is one part of the story. People first go to market is latching onto a very important trend that's going on in the commercial internet, which is a shift from being a search-centric internet to a social-centric internet. So that's an underlying reason why we created it. It's also been created, and I'll explain what it is in just a moment, because I then joined HubSpot after about a year or so, was there for almost 9 years. Inbound marketing has changed. It's not as effective as it used to be, because inbound marketing is a search-centric approach to some degree. It's also very people-centric too, don't get me wrong, but its foundation is content. Not just that, content has exploded. And now with AI, content's exploding even more. So going back to pressure and forces, all of these things are changing pretty quickly all at once. They've been building up until this point, but now businesses need a new way. They need to pivot, to rethink how they go to market because of the fact that also channels are super saturated. There's less new channels. Everything costs more money, from a channel standpoint, but also just inflation overall. The convergence of AI, I could go on and on and on. So what People First GTM tries to do, it says, how do you use 3 things? Storytelling, stories that I just were talking about, storytelling, relationships, and then partnerships. And you need a relationship first to form a partnership, and you ideally need a story to form either to form a relationship or to unite into a relationship to get to a partnership. Use those 3 things in really smart, interesting ways. That's People First go to market. And that's going to help you create, capture, and convert demand into revenue in ways that just make a lot more sense for the way the world works today.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, especially like that, how that little, we can call it a flywheel, or, carousel or whatever, like good stories, capture the attention. The attention kind of begins the initial stages of a relationship. The relationship can therefore, provide value and trust that forms that partnership. So, if we're talking storytelling, like where does one begin to develop and build those stories? Are you talking like storytelling from the brand, like what they provide, or like what sort of stories are you seeing resonates in the market with these companies that you're working with?
People stories. That's why your podcast is amazing. I mean, Friends with Benefits. I mean, it's a story about you, Sam, Jason, tying it into other people's stories and lives.
That's it.
So people, we have this thing where we talk about this and go deep on the education side called Club PF. It's a community and some education. And I do a post every day, Monday through Friday, about People First go to market. Recently, I did a post about this exact topic, which is, storytelling. It's like, everyone knows you got to tell stories, but really the way you do really great storytelling, there's a few different ways, but
it's hard, by the way.
It's hard, but the most important thing people have to realize to tell a good story is you focus on the moment. And it's a moment. It's 1 to 5 to maybe 10 seconds. That is the moment in time where you experience something or think something that changes the way you think, you believe, you act.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and like a classic example is, you will never forget, and it will change your whole life, when you, Sam, and Jason met. That moment when you met lasted 5 seconds. Or a second.
I can still see it as clear as day in my head.
And then you tell a story about what happened to get to that point and maybe what happened after, right? But people don't realize that is the thing that is so important when it comes to storytelling. There's a lot of other important things too. Surprise, suspense, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on about it, but like, that's important.
Yeah.
So tell us about, we're totally going down tangents here, but I think this is relevant. Tell us about like how that relates to a brand, and how, like, when you're saying that, I can see how I could tell a story about that, or Jason could, but when it's a brand, how do we translate that, and how are like corporate marketers thinking about that, or how do you tell them to think about that rather?
Yeah, sure. So, so Sam, you had a point of view on who you probably kind of were attracted to, correct?
Yes.
Before you met Jason.
Example A.
Physical versus mental, whatever, not mental, but like intellect. Personality, maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah. I think we talked about this in the last podcast. I legitimately had like a mental checklist of who I was like looking to meet, date, and establish a relationship with.
So yeah, you could call that like you're kind of you both had a point of view, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah. So you need a point of view, right? You need a point of view. to help you kind of get to these moments. So for example, for me, one of those moments, it lasted 5 seconds, where I remember I typed up an email and said, I'm quitting graduate school. Like I said, I'm not going anymore. But the story that I can tell to get there, that's an interesting story, right? And I would tell you, like, I just quit graduate school and my life just got so much better. But imagine that being a movie. That's first like a scene in a movie, like, and then it's like, wait a minute, then you go back like 6 months or 12 months or 6. It's like that's what brands will do. They say, all right, well, we have a point of view. My point of view was this graduate school just doesn't align with what I think I need to do in life, right? It just doesn't align with my beliefs. Like after doing it for three weeks, I had to experience it to figure that out. So the point of view is important. Then in a business context, I mean, at the end of the day, it's problems, right? Like the business is here to help someone solve a problem or multiple problems. And those problems are either known or unknown by the buyer. Mm-hmm. And it's when that magic moment of like, aha, I didn't know I had that problem. Like, look at me in HubSpot. Like, I remember vaguely pretty well when my boss was like, we need more leads. I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do? I went to Google, typed, how do I generate more leads? What came up? HubSpot told the story of how to generate more leads. Not from softwares or features. They named their point of view, inbound marketing, how to generate more leads. Let me learn that. Gets into education, storytelling, point of view. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that kind of maybe, Sam, what do you think? What do you think with that answer? Is that acceptable?
I think this is great. And I have a big follow-up here because now it's like, okay, so your example with HubSpot is we went to Google and this is your whole thing of like, it was a search-based. HubSpot was out there with content. It came up. It answered my question. So now how are we changing that framework, that foundation with a people first? Me as the user, as the buyer, I still have a question. Where do I go? How do I find that answer if there's too much content, if Google's muddy? Like how is people first answering these questions?
Well, what was the last piece of software did you buy? Did you buy anything for yourself at a business recently?
We upgraded Asana.
Would you? I mean, I've used Monday, Asana, ClickUp. There. I mean, I don't know. We use Asana with TAC. But so wait, did you buy Asana? Or were you just like an influencer, or were you the champion?
Champion. I'm the end user, so I didn't buy it per se. But
okay. So did you ask other people about what you should buy?
This is a terrible example because I got handed Asana. Let's do this. Slack. Jason and I have been talking about communities and Slack is where like, should we use Slack? Should we use something else? And so that was kind of what
Arcadia
we've been exploring.
just signed up for the paid version of Slack.
So let's use that example.
So did you guys talk to anyone before signing up for Slack or did you sign up for it because you've used it in the past?
Use it in the past.
But you also talk to people. I talk to people of like, are there other options? What should we consider?
From like a community standpoint, we've asked like what's the best thing to kind of think about. Everyone kind of goes back to Slack.
How often do you both, I'll ask you both to answer this. You can go first, Sam. How often during the day do you check a social network versus do a Google search?
That's not even a competition. I would say 50-1.
There's your answer.
Yeah. There you go. Okay.
Jason, you do not get to answer. You do not get to answer. You're locked. You're blocked.
No. I was just on a conversation with our friend Will Taylor. I was like, more times than not, I've been going to LinkedIn to search for people who can solve problems that I'm looking for specifically, like an engineer or somebody who can help solve a developer problem, someone who can solve a marketing problem. I'm looking for the who, right? And I've used LinkedIn search as that new functionality. But I mean, you just mentioned it. You just put a label to it, like search-centric to social-centric, right? It's the whole near-bound approach as well. No longer a how economy, it's a who economy. Who's been down this path? Who's solved this problem? Who can help me? And that's exactly what like Will and I were talking about. I was like, who do you know that can help solve for this problem? Like he could have gone and searched as well, but he asked someone he trusted and he knew. I was like, oh, I should go down this path.
Yep.
So I want to get to brass tacks of like, we understand this. We're in partnerships. We all spend more than our fair share of time on LinkedIn and social networks. How are you consulting businesses to approach this? Is it working with influencers? Is it building a partner strategy? How are businesses going people first?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. You first need to know and realize that there was a way that there still is a way that most people and businesses, I should say, go to market, which is company first. And you say, all right, I am doing a company first approach, and that's not working as well, or it's fundamentally broken or flawed, and I need to change. Or I'm starting a business and I just need a way to start this business from a growth standpoint in a way that economically and fundamentally just makes more sense when it's related to how people communicate, learn about things these days, and live their lives. Because you always study humans first, but for anything. I learned this from Brian Halligan and David Cancel. The best entrepreneurs, the best inventors study humans and what is going on at the human level, not the B2C level, like humans. So that's what we do. We study those people, and what that will tell you some of the stuff we've been talking about now. And what a business needs to do then is realize that storytelling and understanding the problems that you think you're solving or should be solving for these particular buyers, and get really, really clear on like the who and the why is where it all starts. That's the foundation. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have that, you need to go spend some time studying that, thinking about it, talking to people about it, validating it. And then once you have that to some degree, never fully until you found product market fit, but once you have that to some degree, you can start like going off and, you know, as you build the product, find product market fit, and then start to spend real money on scaling it. And, but the whole point of this is you got to use the who and the why to ultimately create the things that will build trust at scale. The trust building at scale comes down to three things. Either it's content, it's events, or it's the products you put into the market, typically for free to start with, a la PLG, to build that trust. So it's content, events, or products. Those things relate back to the who, the why, the story, the red thread, the problems. And then from there, you start to say, all right, I picked one of those things, either content, events, or products. I'm then going to think about what is the tactical channel that I should use. Before you do that, though, you ask yourself, I should probably build an audience around this first, which is what everyone needs to do and try. So that, for me, is where like community-led growth kind of comes into play. And that community-led growth is the tip of the spear of people first go to market when you think about channel activation. But to even activate a channel, you need to have something to say. You need a story. You need something to entice the audience and connect the audience to something where they will engage or convert, at least become a subscriber of something, even if it's off your property. They subscribe to your LinkedIn page, follow your LinkedIn page, whatever that might be. And then that starts kind of the motion, and you can kind of go from there.
Man, there's a lot to break down in there.
Yeah, there really is.
It's not easy. This shit's not easy because everything has become more complicated because of there is a lot more of everything these days. Abundance is everywhere. AI is making it even more easy to create abundance. Mm-hmm. So attention is more scarce. All that crap you always read about.
10,000 impressions a day.
Yeah. But I think the thing that people don't talk about, and I haven't found a good way to frame this, is the amount of friction in the economy has greatly reduced. Think about that. Like economic friction. Anyone can start a business. Anyone could say, hey, I want to go build this thing. Thanks, China factory. Go build me this thing and I'll get it in a week. Right? Like 20 years ago, it's like 10 years, it's like, holy shit, I can't do that. Right? So the ways in which the economy works and how much it's become frictionless has said, oh, well, that almost like has put businesses into a period of like, well, what do I do? Because now like it's like the paradox of choice. There's not so much friction. But, you know, it's like it's changed the whole dynamic. So like when you think about go to market, it's gotten more complicated, maybe because of the reduction of friction. That's a hypothesis I have. I'd love to know if you guys think that's true. I'm taking this conversation in a very different direction though that you might want to take it in.
No, here for it. I think what you're saying is like there's less obstacles in the way of creating and getting your product or your company out there, and there's more opportunity as a result.
Which creates more complexity, which makes go to market harder.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to stand out.
So I want to go back to this who and why, and then tie it back to how we started this conversation of that moment in the story that we all build up to. So we'll drop this in the show notes, but I just watched a video about the Spotify campaign. Have you seen that, Mark, that they just did for CMOs?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. You'll like it. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
They targeted, for listeners and for people who haven't seen it, watch the YouTube video, but they targeted 14 CMOs and they wrote custom songs for the CMOs. And then when you open Spotify, this is the song and it's literally about you. And the whole thing was like, we have enough data on our users that you can target whoever you want with something that's very relevant to them and they'll listen. So where I'm going with this is the who is who your buyers is, I'm assuming. The why is what they're trying to accomplish and how you do it. And then we could tie it back together with your point of like the moment. And so I'm thinking about this campaign of like, CMOs are the who. The why is they can't break through the noise and target their audience effectively. And Spotify shows them with a very good story. This is how we help you do that. Is this the progression? Is this what we're talking about?
It's spot on. That's extremely good example of a people first tactical campaign. Yes.
Awesome. So, sorry, Jay, did I just cut you off?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, you talked about building a community. And a lot of companies aren't thinking necessarily about community. It's a very hot word right now. Lots of people are talking about it, but few are doing it.
Doing it effectively. A lot of people are doing it, quote unquote.
But fair. Okay. Good qualification. Tell us the difference between an audience and a community. Or is there a
difference? No, there's a difference there. There's also a difference in community. There's owned communities and there's rented communities. So where do you want to start?
With what most people have, which I would assume is rented.
Yes. Most people rent communities. An example of that is LinkedIn. That's a rented community. Social network, social community, whatever you want to call it, social platform. You know, you participate in it, but it's not the thing you own. Versus what you folks might want to be building at Arcadia or the collective, that's an owned community. You have ownership over it, even though you have to use something else to help bring it to life from a software standpoint, right? Like you're not going to build your own community software. It's like no one's going to do that probably. But audience versus community is definitely different. Audience, you got enough where someone's paying attention, right? Or people are paying attention. If you have an owned community though, that's where you transfer audience interest, engagement, participation, if you will, into a deeper type of relationship with you or the brand through what I call a membership type of experience. You become a member of the community, of the brand, and you've explicitly opted in to do something more with the brand. Like whatever that more might be, right? So there is a difference in my opinion.
No, I can see that for sure. And I think we actually were talking about that the other night. The rented communities, like we're spinning up a newsletter right now, right? So it's like, do you push that newsletter out through LinkedIn or do you push it out through like your own owned platform or owned network, like an email newsletter through HubSpot or Beehive is what we signed up for, stuff like that. So like I feel like the best kind of go to market approach, if we may use that term, is to kind of distribute it through your own channel, right, to your own community, and control everything therein.
You probably need to do that. But like you need to do both at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. So, got a question. I saw a post recently speaking about community, right? You said build a community. Maybe it wasn't you. I saw a post somewhere as we were looking at some research, putting this together, right? Build a community before you build a company, right? So as someone who's building a company, actually two, quite interested in this take around like why you say to build that community before you actually build your company.
And let me ask a follow up here too.
Yeah.
Is this like, are you going out here and saying every company, every brand should have a community?
Should have an owned community? Is that the question?
Yeah. I mean, because then at some point they all lose.
So this is where I don't like to use the term community, because every brand should have. I don't like to speak in absolutes. So not every brand.
Okay.
Most brands should have a membership experience. That's why we call it member-led growth. In the people first go-to-market model, it's called member-led growth for a reason. Look, I know we're probably 5-10 years ahead of this. People first GTM is even pretty ahead. It's pretty innovative. So there's a lot of confusion here. I hate strong word. I don't really love the term community. Same with content and community. Those are like loaded terms. Media, same thing, right? And you're never going to get everyone to agree, etc. But going back to your question, Jason, which is related, what I've talked about is this idea, and it goes back to your point, Sam, about audience versus community. I've talked about the idea of minimal viable audience versus minimal viable product. And I have strong opinions here. I strong opinions, somewhat weakly held. For most businesses, I think focusing on MVA before MVP is the right move.
So essentially, like, you're building your design partners as you're building your company to launch as a minimum viable audience.
Or you're just, because like you might be going into a space where you don't know much about, and like, all right, let me try to like learn about this space, listen, learn, spend some weeks doing that. Through that, I'm going to start to figure out how to participate in this thing, the conversations, aka the community at large, right? Whatever that is, because it's not an audience yet. It's just a network of people. You could also, I like network almost better than community, because then it's like a network of people talking about this. It's tough though. Even that's convoluted. But yeah, let me like study that. I see a problem they all have. No one solved this problem. Cool. Before I try to build a product, let me try to actually capture 20, 30 of those people in a way that maybe isn't like a membership yet, but it's like, hey, I'm going to start talking about this thing with these people, and I'm going to build a podcast or a show or an email newsletter, or I'm just going to publish something on my own to get them to follow me on my own personal thing, or I'm going to start being active on Reddit and people follow me, like whatever that is, right? Building your minimal viable audience that you can then eventually turn into maybe more of an owned membership or community experience, which then translates into a product you build, is the approach I would take these days.
No, I like that. And I think that's a little bit about what we're trying to build in as well around here, and what we're the platform we're building, the software we're building, and stuff like that. So thinking about how we can pull in that right audience to give us that right level of feedback to begin to put it out in the market. One question I was just thinking about though was like, as it relates to community, and I think me, you, and Nick Sal, our buddy Nick, when we were at Drift together, kind of took a good approach. Is like treating your ecosystem as like a community inside of your business, right? Too often you see companies like we got channel partners over here, we got tech partners over here. Sometimes they report to different people, and then you've got the whole strategic alliance, the Salesforce. Don't even try to get them involved, but like, what's your take on? Sometimes, what's your take on like treating that ecosystem as a community, right? And how to actually tap into that and pull them all together.
So it's a great question. So you could call it the community ecosystem or the network ecosystem. But I think all of those things you just gave as examples are nodes, are sub networks. So again, this is whatever language, whatever word you want to pick, are networks within the community ecosystem map, right? And some of those things are owned, rented, but like, and some have like arrows going between them in both directions. Some have an arrow going in one direction. That's what the greatest companies do. They build out an ecosystem. I like to call it a community ecosystem.
Yeah.
That is very well it's actually not it's very well intended over time. It's very messy though at the same time, but what it does have in common, the great companies that do this, they have 2 or 3 things in that community ecosystem map, and I'll give you an example, that are like the things that attract all of the gravitational pull. Like it's like it's almost like it's kind of like a black hole, but not really, because that's not a good example. It's more like it's like a really powerful planet. And you have all these moons orbiting around it. So like an example of that would be, let's use like maybe a should we use? We could use Disney as an example. We could use Disney.
We know
Disney World is one of those things.
Yep.
Like the physical Disney World location. Right? Like how many people do you think have visited Disney World over the years? I mean, it's probably 500 million. Do you know?
Like, I don't know. It's too big for me.
It's too many people, right? You don't even know. Go to B2B example. HubSpot Academy is one of those things. I mean, it you know, it also the biggest thing in HubSpot's network though is the HubSpot blog. That's one of the biggest things in the nodes of the network. Those are both owned. But then you could go to HubSpot's YouTube channel. That's another node in the community ecosystem app. I can't remember how many subscribers they have. Like followers, I should say. Like, you know, whatever. Yeah. So anyway, but your point is, I think you talked about partners, blah, blah, like that stuff. Sure. I think those are the people that participate. The people.
Yeah, 100% for sure.
Labels of people versus destinations that I'm talking about, right?
Correct.
And I think too. So wait, I'm just going to articulate this because it was a light bulb for me, because this is the world I live, breathe. Salesforce, they have their Trailblazer course. Says you go to conferences, people are wearing Trailblazer hoodies, and you're like, damn it, I want a Trailblazer hoodies. So then you go take the courses. And then they have their ecosystem partners, and that's like a community like you've never been a part of. And then if you're a Salesforce user, there's user communities. And so there's all these different nodes that Salesforce engages with their users. But then there's also like, what's the word I'm looking for? Sub ecosystems within this, like users getting together to talk about Salesforce. Like, so that's the game.
That's the game. I mean, and I am not an astrologist, but it's basically like you have a universe with multiple solar systems.
Yeah. It's funny, like shortly, like when I was still back at Drift, I think you may have just left, but I built out something called Orbit. Like, what is the orbit of our ecosystem?
I remember this.
What does it look like?
Yeah.
What is all the specific touch points that are important to a customer? Like, what are the things that we have that we've got control of, and what's the ecosystem look like, and how do we bring it all together? And then around that, like much like your graph on TACK GTM, like how do we surround that whole orbit with the partner ecosystem, and how do we bring it all together and treat it like a community so that they're all working to the same goal of this orbit, so that channel partners are knowing who the tech partners are and how they're integrated and how they're all doing work together that impact and touch the Drift product, that impact and touch the customer, so that we're all working towards somewhat of the same goal within each other's roadmaps, right? How do we align to a agency or a channel partner's roadmap, what they're rolling out for customers and products they're in, and how are we impacting our tech partners' roadmap by driving more integrations and more data points, et cetera. It's like we created this whole orbit of what was most strategic and most important to the product, to the customer, and built out the ecosystem around it. And like, I remember going to Nick one day and I was like, man, we have this partner news hour, which we did once a month. I was like, I'm going to start bringing tech partners in. He was like, why? He's like, I want to treat this ecosystem like it's a community. And here's why. I'm building this thing called Orbit, and I want all the partners to touch all the parts of it.
Exactly. You're connecting the nodes of the community ecosystem together in deliberate and intentional ways. Sometimes it just happens serendipitously. Like it just is like they just do it on their own. Like you had no idea.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, from there, we began to see a ton of growth. Our partners started to see a lot of growth as a result. They started working together, and it was really fun to see some of these agency partners who had never worked with 6 Sense or Sales Loft start to work with them and start to get success as a whole. And like we began to lift the whole community.
People
Right?
first.
We gave them their TAC, right? Put them on the right course. Man, this is I feel like we've just barely scratched the surface. There will be a Mark Kilens episode 2, but we're going to be respectful of time
To talk about snow.
Yes. Snow, oysters, like oyster debate. Like the best oysters are East Coast, Northern
100%.
New England oysters.
Without a doubt. Yeah, we went somewhere the other day and all they had were Washington oysters, and I was like, ooh, I'll take them, but I'm not happy about this.
No, I can't even really touch that. I mean, those are not good. No.
Sorry, Washington friends.
Anyway,
I'm
sorry.
Mark.
You need the salinity. You need the salinity, the complexity of intense tides. You need there's a lot of things.
Pressure.
I know a little bit of oysters, not much, but yeah,
the pressure that makes them. So let's wrap with our fun friend question. You're a big sailor. You're a big boater.
I'm not a big sailor.
Right.
I'm not a big sailor.
Bigger than me.
You can. I've never been on a sailboat, so you're more than I am.
You've never been on a sailboat, neither of you?
Never. No, I'm waiting for you. Waiting for the TAC network offsite.
That's crazy. I've always lived within like an hour of an ocean, so like I guess that's where it's like different. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Have not done that. But final question for you.
Sorry.
Who is Mark bringing on his 3-hour tour? If you get the reference. Who's your Professor, Skipper, Gilligan, and Marianne, if I may? It's a Gilligan's Island reference for those who don't know.
I have to do all of those characters. Right, just one.
Give me some people who you're bringing on your 3-hour tour.
You may or may not get stuck on an island with.
So do they have to be alive or could they be dead?
Anybody you want. They could be fictional too.
I would bring. This is tough.
Yeah.
Jesus. I would bring George Washington.
Okay.
It's very interesting to me.
He knows a thing or two about boats.
Oh my God. I would bring George Washington. I would bring. I always get this confused. Is it Neil Armstrong? The first guy in the moon, or is it the other guy?
Yeah.
Is he the?
No, that's right.
Is it Neil Armstrong?
Neil, Buzz, Shepard.
Well, I always get confused. Like who stepped on the moon first? Technically,
that was Neil.
Neil. Okay.
Yeah.
Neil Armstrong. I would bring him. I would bring. Oh my God, what's her name? Oh my God, she's so inspiring. Passed away somewhat recently. Oh my God.
RBG?
Maya Angelou.
Okay. Like that.
How many more people do I get? Is this already taking too long?
We can cap it at 3. I like those are 3 solid people who would give you some good content and conversations for quite a while. So I like it.
Well, yeah. But there's got to be one more. There's one. Let me give you one more. Sorry. This is a really good question. You should have prepared me for this question because then I would have been more.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the okay, fine.
That's the point.
It's
kind of the hot seat of the podcast.
Well, you should literally then give me a timer and give your guest a timer because then I probably would have given you worse answers. Though.
We should do that.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I'm trying.
You can come back to us. You can drop it in the LinkedIn post when we share.
I like odd numbers, so that's 4 people. That includes me. 5 plus it's too many dudes. It's like I'm trying to think of someone, a woman, who I would really. Oh, you know what? Because I used to also fly, and I think she would have a tremendous perspective. This would be a good one. This would be a good one. Amelia Earhart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a solid one. I like that one a lot. That's really good.
Think about that. Like these people that are like pioneers, basically. You know what I mean? That's how I.
Yep. I like that. No, there's a theme there. I love it. That's good. Amelia Earhart's an obscure reference, but I'm going to lock that one away for for other references when I get asked questions. This has been fantastic, man. There will be a second episode. Thank you so much for the time and for jumping on with us. Excited about what you're building at TAC GTM, TAC Network, and Club PF. Keep preaching the people first thing, and we'll see you out there on the socials.
Thank you
Thanks,
both.
friends.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Jason. So much fun.
See y'all.
Peace.